This is the reason Max Verstappen looks faster when the car looks worse. Most fans think low grip exposes weakness, and that sliding always costs lap time, but Verstappen's entire driving philosophy builds on something most people fundamentally misunderstand. His teammates have struggled for years to match his setup preferences, and his father used intense karting drills that gave Max abilities almost no other driver on the grid possesses. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you might completely change how you watch Verstappen drive. Most fans watching a car slide through a corner assume the driver has made a mistake, that instability means lost time and something has gone wrong. But at the highest level of motorsport, the relationship between grip and speed works differently than it appears. A tyre generates maximum lateral force not when perfectly planted, but when operating at what engineers call an optimal slip angle, which for Formula 1 tyres sits somewhere around 6 to 8 degrees. The tyre is not fully gripping, and it is not fully sliding either. It exists in that narrow window where the sidewall deforms just enough to create rotation without losing traction. And that is where Verstappen separates himself from everyone else on the grid. He does not just tolerate that zone, he lives inside it. Verstappen strongly prefers oversteer. He has been completely open about this throughout his career. His exact words tell you everything you need to know. Understeer is slow, he explained. It does not matter if you like it or not, it is slow, and if you want a fast car, it needs to be on the nose. This preference is not just personal, it shapes how Red Bull develops the entire car around him. Pierre Wash, Red Bull's technical director, said that Max wants a car that is very responsive, that he wants a lot of front axle compared to others they have worked with in the past. Wacker went further, saying it is a bit easier to find performance at the front of the car because Verstappen has the capacity and the preference for a very sensitive front end. That meant Max opens the door for Red Bull to make the car faster. But this creates a serious problem for his teammates. Alex Albon, who drove alongside Verstappen, described the setup as eye-wateringly sharp. He compared it to turning mouse sensitivity completely to maximum so the cursor darts across the screen with every small movement. The teammate statistics tell the rest of the story. Pierre Gasly averaged more than half a second slower in qualifying and was out-qualified 11-1. Across 26 races, Alex Albon managed to out-qualify Verstappen exactly once. 2024 was Sergio Perez's worst season, with a 23-1 qualifying deficit. Daniel Ricciardo remains the only teammate who ever outscored Verstappen over full seasons, and that happened back in 2016 and 2017, before Max had fully developed his approach. Where did this ability come from? Because it did not appear out of nowhere. The answer starts with Jos Verstappen and a karting program that bordered on extreme. 4.5 years old, that is when Max first sat in a kart. His first race win came at 7, and by 15 he captured 3 international karting championships in a single season, something nobody had accomplished before. But the training methods matter more than any trophy count. Helmut Marko, Red Bull's advisor, described one particular method that explains everything. During winter training camps in Italy, rain would arrive and every other driver headed to the cafeteria to stay warm and dry. Only one kart kept doing laps, Max's kart. Marko put it simply: as long as his fingers were not completely frozen, he kept driving. Jos confirmed how far he pushed his son during those freezing Wednesday sessions when school finished at noon. They would arrive at the kart track in brutal cold, with Jos letting the van run so Max could warm up between stints, then sending him out for 10 laps anyway. When Max returned saying he could not feel his hands, Jos gave him 3 minutes before sending him back out. Max later admitted he could barely hold the steering wheel during those sessions. And that's when another training method becomes relevant, one that explains Verstappen's uncanny ability to diagnose car problems instantly. Bradley Skeins, Red Bull's performance coach, revealed that Jos would send Max out in a kart after secretly changing something on the chassis, then give him exactly 2 laps to identify what had changed. Skeins pointed out you see that ability now whenever Max drives out in the Red Bull and immediately asks if they change something on the left front, and it will be the smallest adjustment imaginable. Jos also added lead weight to Max's kart without telling him about the handicap. Richard Pex, who worked with them during those karting years, confirmed that Max had no idea about the extra weight and that Jos only showed satisfaction when Max matched the lap times of the others despite the disadvantage. The team once swapped engines between Max and another driver to test whether equipment explained the gap, and nothing changed. Max remained faster because he simply extracted more speed from corners and reached top speed earlier than anyone else. The technical explanation for why Verstappen's style actually produces faster lap times comes down to a concept called the traction circle. Every tyre has a finite amount of grip available. Any force applied laterally for cornering, combined with force applied longitudinally for acceleration, must stay within that circle. If the combined forces exceed that limit, the tyre loses traction entirely. Drivers who prefer understeer keep the rear stable and rely on the front tyres to handle most of the directional work. That creates safer, more predictable behaviour, but it costs time on corner entry. Verstappen takes the opposite approach. He uses trail braking to load the front tyres, which rotates the car earlier in the corner. Because the car points toward the exit sooner, he straightens the wheel earlier and applies throttle before his rivals reach that point. Peter Windsor, a longtime Formula One journalist, described this as Verstappen creating a perfect platform for a trillionth of a second between direction changes. Formula One television analyst Julian Palmer called it manipulative driving, where drivers like Verstappen remain on top of the car at almost all times, with very soft, supple inputs, completely different from reactive drivers who display jerkier pedal and steering traces. Brazil 2016 became the famous example that built Verstappen's wet weather reputation. A pit stop dropped him to 16th position in torrential rain, and what followed looked almost impossible as he gained 13 places in roughly 14 laps to finish third on the podium. Toto Wolff watched it happen and called it the Verstappen show, claiming physics were being redefined. But Brazil 2024 might have been even more impressive from a pure execution standpoint. Verstappen started 17th after qualifying penalties and won by more than 19 seconds. He gained 6 positions on the opening lap alone. 17 different times throughout the race, he set the fastest lap. Julian Palmer analysed the performance and called it his best wet race yet, even more clinical than the 2016 drive that made him famous. Imola 2021 delivered another dominant wet weather performance where Verstappen won by more than 22 seconds after an outstanding launch that carried him past both his teammate and the pole sitter at turn 1. What nobody should ignore, though, is that Verstappen has also struggled when conditions turned against him and the setup did not match. Silverstone 2025 brought rain that exposed his low downforce configuration choice, causing a spin that dropped him to 10th before he recovered to 5th. Afterward, he admitted they were pretty poor in those low-grip conditions, and he called the entire race horrible. The ability exists, and the evidence supports it, but everything still depends on having a car that suits his particular style. The 2026 regulations fundamentally change how Formula One cars behave in ways that connect directly to everything Verstappen has trained for. The power split shifts from roughly 80% combustion and 20% electric to a 50-50 split between them. Electric motor output nearly triples from 120 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts, which delivers instant torque that engineers have already admitted causes traction challenges during development. Downforce drops by 15 to 30% compared to current cars, while active aerodynamics replace the drag reduction system entirely. Lighter chassis and narrower dimensions change the handling characteristics across every circuit. Multiple drivers have tested these new cars in simulators, and their feedback paints a consistent picture of concern. Carlos Sainz described power drops that cause straight-line speed to stabilize and even decrease in the middle of a straight, calling the lap-to-lap variability disconcerting to manage. Lewis Hamilton warned that less downforce combined with more torque will make rain driving very, very, very hard, much harder than current conditions that already challenge the grid. Lance Stroll called the situation very, very critical and expressed concern that Formula One risks becoming more of an energy and battery science project than a driving competition. Fred Vasseur, Ferrari's team principal, summarized the shift in priorities with one statement. "Right now, power counts," he explained, "but next year, drivability becomes everything." The misconception about low-grip driving isn't just incomplete, it runs completely backwards from reality. Sliding doesn't automatically cost lap time, and instability doesn't automatically signal driver error. Drivers who can operate in that grey zone where the tyre neither fully grips nor fully slides, that's where the advantage lives when conditions turn difficult. Verstappen trained for these moments starting in childhood when his father put him in freezing conditions, added secret weight to his kart, and forced him to drive in rain while everyone else stayed warm inside. Red Bull built their entire car development philosophy around his preference for a sharp and responsive front end that most teammates find undrivable. The year 2026 brings lighter cars with more torque and less downforce, alongside unpredictable power delivery that can change from lap to lap. The skills that made Verstappen dominant in Brazil might become even more valuable under these new conditions. Alex Albon compared the incoming regulations to Formula E racing and predicted that drivers who have the brain capacity to understand and facilitate all these demands will perform well. The real question isn't whether low-grip driving skills matter for the future of Formula One. The question is whether the rest of the grid can learn what Verstappen has known since he was 7 years old.